Horse left to suffer, covered in ticks under the sun and abandonment. A horse is left to suffer, covered in ticks, under the sun and abandonment. When finally found, his skinny and wounded body seems to have no more strength to resist. But the Aisa rescue reveals a dirty story of cruelty, impunity, and neglect. What happens in the end will bring tears to your eyes and change how you see justice. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The dust raised by the unknown car still hung in the air when Martha Wilson stopped watering her garden beds and frowned. In 30 years of taking care of the small rural property on the outskirts of Cedar Creek, she had learned to be suspicious of unexpected visitors. The man who stepped out of the vehicle wore formal clothes inappropriate for the heat of the countryside, and his dark sunglasses couldn't hide his calculating look. Jason, her 16-year-old grandson, appeared on the porch of the simple house, still holding the cell phone he was using to study for college entrance exams. The tall, thin young man had inherited from his grandmother a sharp curiosity and sense of justice, characteristics that frequently put him in complicated situations. At school. "Are you Martha Wilson?" asked the man without introducing himself. "I am. How can I help you?" The visitor looked around, evaluating the modest but well-kept property. The approximately 7 acres of land supported a small vegetable garden, some chickens, and 2 elderly horses that Martha kept more out of compassion than necessity. "My boss sent a message. You like to meddle in business that isn't yours, don't you? Well, he wants you to know that certain attitudes can have unpleasant consequences." Jason came down the porch steps, his blood boiling. "What kind of threat is that?" The man smiled, with disdain. "It's not a threat, kid. It's just friendly advice. There are people who should learn to mind their own business." Martha crossed her arms, her face hardened with determination. "If your boss has something against me, he should come talk to me personally. I don't need intermediaries for adult conversations." "Very well," said the man, adjusting his jacket. "Consider yourself warned." After the car disappeared in a cloud of dust, grandmother and grandson remained silent. Martha knew exactly what this was about. 3 weeks ago, she had witnessed Richard Thompson, an influential rancher in the region, mistreating horses on his neighboring property. When she confronted the man, he laughed in her face and said his animals were not the problem of a nosy old woman. "Grandma, you should have filed a police report," muttered Jason, still disturbed by the threatening visit. "And you think that would have accomplished anything? Richard has friends at the police station, the mayor's office, the farmers' union. That's how things work around here, my grandson." Jason knew this reality well. Since he was little, he had heard stories about how the powerful people in the region operated. Intimidation, political favors, and an unwritten code that certain people were untouchable. But that didn't diminish his outrage. The afternoon followed, its normal course until around 5 o'clock, when the persistent barking of Daisy, the property's mixed-breed dog, caught Martha's attention. The animal was running toward the fence that separated the lands, barking and returning, as if trying to communicate something urgent. "What is it, Daisy?" asked Martha, following the dog. Jason put down his books and accompanied his grandmother. As they approached the boundary with the abandoned pasture that lay between their property and Richard's farm, they heard labored breathing coming from the low vegetation. "My God in heaven," whispered Martha, stopping abruptly. Among the dry bushes, a horse was lying on its side, breathing with difficulty. The animal was a skeleton covered with skin, with protruding ribs and dull coat. Parasites were visibly moving on its body, and open wounds attracted flies. But what shocked Martha most was the look in the animal's eyes, completely empty, as if it had given up on living. "Grandma, this is terrible," whispered Jason, feeling his stomach turn. Martha approached slowly, speaking in a low, reassuring tone. "Easy, my dear, easy. Nobody's going to hurt you." The horse tried to raise its head but barely had the strength for the movement. Martha quickly examined the condition of the animal, and her heart tightened. It wasn't just malnutrition, it was deliberate and cruel abandonment. Jason, go get the rope, that blue tarp that's in the shed, and some boards. We're going to get this angel out of here. Are you sure? If it's Richard's animal? If it's Richard's, let him prove it. And if he abandoned this horse to die, then he no longer has any rights over it. Jason ran to get the materials, while Martha continued talking softly to the animal. She had cared for horses since childhood and knew that the psychological state was as important as the physical for recovery. The rescue process was slow and delicate. Using the boards as levers and the rope with extreme care, they managed to help the horse stand up. The animal was trembling violently, not just from weakness, but from fear. Every sudden movement made it back away, and Martha realized that beyond neglect, there were signs of deep trauma. Slowly, slowly, she repeated, while Jason documented everything with his cell phone, instinctively knowing they would need evidence. The journey to the improvised corral took almost 2 hours. The horse stopped constantly, and they respected its pace. When they finally reached the small enclosure that Martha had prepared with fresh water and hay, the animal collapsed onto the straw, exhausted. "Now, what do we do, Grandma?" "Now we take care of it, little by little, with patience and affection." Martha examined the animal more thoroughly under the electric light of the corral. Beyond severe malnutrition and parasites, there were strange marks on the horse's body that suggested inappropriate use of equipment. More worrisome was a nearly erased mark on the hip that appeared to be a deliberately damaged ownership registration. "Jason, take pictures of these marks. And tomorrow morning before going to school, you'll go to the veterinarian in town and ask for guidance. Take these photos." "What if Richard finds out?" Martha looked at her grandson with determination. If he wants his horse back, let him prove he took proper care of it, and let him explain why the animal was abandoned, nearly dying, at the boundary of the properties. Throughout the night, Martha stayed awake, checking on the horse's condition every 2 hours. The animal drank water in small amounts and accepted small quantities of moistened feed. More importantly, its eyes began to follow her movements, showing signs that there might still be hope. Jason could barely concentrate in his classes the next day. During the break, he discreetly posted some photos on social media, asking for information about caring for animals in a state of abandonment. The response was immediate. Dozens of comments with advice, offers of help, and indignation at the animal's condition. When he returned from school, he found his grandmother gently brushing the horse's coat, removing parasites and cleaning minor wounds. The animal was no longer trembling so much and allowed the touch, although it still startled at sudden movements. "How is he, Grandma?" "Better, much better." "Look," said Martha, extending her hand to the horse's muzzle. The horse hesitated for a moment, then touched its nose to her palm. "He's beginning to trust." It was at that moment they heard the sound of cars approaching. 3 vehicles stopped in front of the gate, and Martha immediately recognized Richard Thompson getting out of the first car, accompanied by 2 men she didn't know. "Martha Wilson!" shouted Richard, walking toward the corral. "I heard you took my horse. That's theft!" Jason positioned himself beside his grandmother, discreetly recording the conversation on his cell phone. Martha kept her voice calm but firm. "Your horse, Richard, then explain to me why I found him nearly dead, abandoned, covered in wounds and parasites. What I do with my animals is none of your business. That horse is my registered property, and I want him back, now. Where's the registration? Then, and where's the explanation for his condition?" Richard turned red with anger. "You don't know who you're messing with, Martha. I have important friends. I can make your life a living hell." "Your threats don't intimidate me, Richard. If this horse is really yours, prove it. But while he's under my care, he will be treated with dignity." One of the men accompanying Richard whispered something in his ear. The rancher looked at Jason, who continued recording, and his face took on an even more hostile expression. "This matter isn't over," he said, returning to the car. "You'll regret having meddled where you weren't called." After the cars departed, Martha and Jason remained silent, processing the confrontation. The horse, which had become agitated during the discussion, gradually calmed down with Martha's reassuring voice. "Grandma, we need help. This is going to turn into a war." Martha stroked the animal's neck, feeling its calmer breathing. "Then let it be war, my grandson. But this angel isn't going back to be mistreated. Not while I'm alive." That night, Jason researched online about animal protection organizations and laws related to the care of domestic animals. He discovered that there were several legal ways to report mistreatment and that animal abandonment was a crime. Most importantly, he found the contact of an NGO specialized in rescues that could help them. Meanwhile, Martha remained in the corral, watching the horse rest. The animal could now stand for longer periods and had begun to timidly explore the enclosure. But there was still something in its eyes that worried her, a deep fear that went beyond hunger and physical mistreatment. "What did they do to you, my dear?" she murmured, silently promising that she would discover the truth and ensure the animal would never go through similar suffering again. The first chapter of this story of resistance and compassion was coming to an end. But Martha and Jason knew that the real battle was just beginning. Between them and justice for the abandoned horse lay a path full of obstacles, threats, and revelations that would test their courage and determination. The next morning, Jason woke before sunrise to a message on his cell phone that made his blood freeze. It was from an unknown number. "Too smart a kid can have problems at school. Be careful what you post on the internet." He showed the message to his grandmother, who was preparing a special feed mixture for the horse. Martha read it and shook, her head more determined than frightened. "They're afraid, Jason. People who threaten kids are desperate. But what if they do something at school? Then we'll find out together. You go as normal, but if there's any problem, call me immediately." While Jason was getting ready for classes, Martha observed the horse. In just 2 days of proper care, the animal was already showing signs of physical recovery. It drank more water, ate small regular portions, and had even taken a few timid steps around the enclosure. But it was the emotional aspect that concerned Martha most. The horse still startled at any louder sound and backed away when it saw objects that resembled riding equipment. "Good morning, my angel," she said softly, entering the enclosure with a bucket of fresh water. "Today we'll try something different." Instead of approaching directly, Martha sat in the middle of the enclosure and remained silent, just observing the animal. Gradually, curiosity overcame fear, and the horse approached, investigating first with its muzzle, and then allowing her to gently touch its neck. It was in this moment of connection that a familiar pickup truck stopped in front of the property. Martha immediately recognized Bill Johnson, an elderly neighbor who lived about a mile away. The man got out of the vehicle carrying a bag of feed and a worried expression. "Martha, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Bill, come in." Bill looked nervously around before speaking. "Look, I know about the horse you took in, and I also know that Richard is furious." "So what?" "The animal was abandoned, nearly dying." I know. And I admire your courage, but I need to tell you something." Bill lowered his voice. "Last night, Richard stopped by my house, said you stole a valuable horse and that he's going to make you return it by force." Martha felt a chill but kept her voice firm. "Valuable? An animal that was being devoured by parasites, malnourished, abandoned." "Martha, you don't understand. Richard isn't joking. He has connections with dangerous people, ranchers who solve problems in ways the law can't reach." "Are you trying to scare me, Bill?" "I'm trying to protect you," the neighbor exploded. "That man is capable of anything. I've seen how he treats animals, how he treats employees. You messed with his pride, and that's dangerous." Martha looked at the horse, which had been startled by the altered tone of the conversation and had retreated to the corner of the enclosure. "Then tell me something, Bill. How many times have you seen animals being mistreated and stayed quiet out of fear?" Bill lowered his head, ashamed. Many times." "Well, I'm tired of staying quiet. This poor animal almost died from negligence and cruelty. If Richard wants war, he'll have war. But fair and within the law." The neighbor sighed and handed over the bag of feed. "At least accept this. It's not much, but it might help." After Bill left, Martha reflected on the situation. She knew she was facing powerful forces, but she also knew she wasn't completely alone. Jason's reaction on social media had sparked interest and solidarity from many people. At school, Jason faced his first test of fire. During the break, he was called to the principal's office where he found Principal Johnson with a serious expression. "Jason, I need to talk to you about your activities on social media." The young man's heart raced. "What activities?" "These posts about animal mistreatment. I received a call from concerned parents saying you're spreading serious accusations without proof." Jason remained calm, remembering his grandmother's advice to always tell the truth. "Principal, I only posted photos of an animal we found in a state of abandonment. I didn't name names or make accusations. But people are drawing conclusions, and that can generate conflicts in the community." "Conflicts? Or embarrassment for those who mistreat animals?" The principal sighed. "Jason, you're a good student, but you need to understand that certain situations are complex. We shouldn't always get involved in problems that don't concern us. Cruelty to animals concerns all of us. I understand your point of view, but I need to ask you to be careful with what you post. We don't want the school to be associated with controversies." Jason left the principal's office indignant, but not surprised. He knew that the influence of people like Richard Thompson extended far beyond their farms. During lunch, he received a message from his grandmother. "We have a visitor, a veterinarian from the NGO you contacted." Jason asked to be excused from afternoon classes and ran home finding Martha talking with a young woman in a white coat who was carefully examining the horse. "Dr. Sarah," said Martha, introducing her grandson. "This is Jason, who made the first contact with you." The veterinarian greeted Jason and continued her examination. "The state of malnutrition was severe, but you did an excellent job with first aid. The animal is responding well to treatment." "Doctor," asked Jason, "can you confirm if there was mistreatment?" Sarah pointed to various marks on the animal's body. "These injuries are not accidental. There are clear signs of inappropriate use of equipment, medical negligence, and abandonment. This here," she said, pointing to the faded mark on the hip, "appears to be an attempt to erase an ownership registration." Martha and Jason exchanged a significant look. "Does that mean someone tried to hide the origin of the animal?" "Exactly. And look at this." Sarah showed small scars on the neck and legs. "These are marks of violent restraint. This horse was subjected to brutal training." The veterinarian took several photos and collected samples for tests. "I'll prepare a complete technical report. With this evidence, you have a legal basis to keep the animal under protective care." "And how long will it take?" asked Jason. "A few days for the tests, but the visual evidence is already sufficient for a preliminary injunction." After the veterinarian left, promising to return in 2 days with the results, Martha and Jason felt more confident. They had technical and legal support, in addition to the growing interest of the online community following the case. But Richard Thompson wasn't idle. That same afternoon, a new character appeared in the story, James Wilson, a lawyer known in the region for solving problems for influential ranchers, not always through the most ethical means. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, getting out of a luxury car, "my client, Mr. Richard Thompson, sent me to resolve this situation amicably." "What situation?" asked Martha, suspicious. "The return of the horse that legally belongs to him. I've brought the ownership documents here." James showed some papers that, at first glance, seemed legitimate, but Jason, who had learned to be suspicious, noticed strange details. "When are these documents from?" he asked. "That's none of your business, kid. They're valid documents that prove ownership." Martha examined the papers more carefully. "Strange. The date here says the registration was made last week. How can that be? If the animal had been abandoned for weeks." The lawyer became visibly uncomfortable. "Bureaucratic procedures sometimes delay things. The important thing is that everything is now regularized." "Nothing is regularized," said a firm voice behind them. It was Sarah, the veterinarian, who had returned. "These documents are fraudulent. The registration number doesn't match official standards." James tried to argue, but Sarah was well informed about the documentation necessary to prove animal ownership. Besides, she continued, even if they were legitimate, the law provides that animals in situations of mistreatment can be removed from their owners. The lawyer realized his strategy had failed. Very well, but this isn't over. My client has resources for a long and expensive legal battle. Do you? After his departure, Martha sat heavily on the porch. The reality of the situation was becoming clear. It wasn't just about rescuing an animal, but facing an entire system of power and influence. "Grandma, we can't give up now," said Jason, sitting beside her. "We won't give up, but I need you to understand. This is going to get much harder before it gets better." As if to confirm her words, the landline phone rang. Martha answered and heard an unfamiliar male voice. "Mrs. Wilson? I heard you like to take care of animals. What a shame. It would be if something happened to the other animals on your property. Accidents happen, don't they?" Martha hung up the phone, her face pale. Jason immediately realized something serious had happened. "What is it, Grandma?" "They threatened the other animals, the chickens, the old horses." Jason felt a wave of anger. "They can't do that. They can and they will try, but you know something? Every threat they make only proves we're on the right track." That night, as they set up a surveillance scheme to protect all the animals on the property, Martha and Jason realized they had crossed a line of no return. What began as a spontaneous act of compassion was turning into a battle that would test not only their courage, but their faith in justice. The horse, oblivious to the political and legal complexities around it, continued its slow recovery. Each day stronger, more confident, more willing to accept affection and care. It had become the silent symbol of a greater struggle, the struggle between cruelty and compassion, between power and justice, between fear and courage. And as Martha gently caressed the animal's muzzle before going to sleep, she knew there was no turning back. War had been declared, and they would fight to the end. Dawn brought Richard Thompson's first direct strike. Martha woke to Daisy's desperate barking and ran to the window. Under the moonlight, she saw a hooded figure cutting the fence of the corral where the recovered horse slept. "Jason! Jason, wake up!" she shouted, running to her grandson's room. When they reached the corral, the intruder had already disappeared, leaving a hole large enough for the animal to escape. The horse was trembling in the corner of the enclosure, clearly terrified by the strange noise and movement, but it hadn't tried to flee. "He's too scared to leave," observed Jason, carefully approaching the animal. Martha examined the cut wires. This was deliberate. They wanted him to escape and get hurt or to be found outside our property, but he didn't leave. Because he's already learned that here is safe. This little animal is smarter than they think. While Jason temporarily repaired the fence with wood and wire they had in the shed, Martha noticed something that made her blood freeze. On the horse's legs was a superficial but recent wound. "Jason, look at this." The young man examined the wound. "It looks like someone tried to hurt him, but he managed to move away. Or someone wanted to leave a mark, as if he had hurt himself trying to escape." The morning brought more problems. Jason arrived at school and found posters stuck on the bulletin boards with photos of him and his grandmother, accusing them of theft and defamation against respectable citizens. The text, clearly produced by someone with resources, claimed they were using a stolen animal to get donations on the internet. That's a lie. Jason tore down one of the posters, but there were dozens spread throughout the school. "Hold on there, buddy," said a voice behind him. It was Mark, a classmate known for repeating his parents' opinions without questioning. "My dad said you're defaming Richard Thompson, a respected rancher in the region. Was your dad there when we found the horse nearly dead? Did he see the condition of the animal? But Richard said the horse ran away and hurt itself, that you took advantage of the situation." Jason realized he was facing something bigger than he imagined, an organized disinformation campaign. Throughout the day, he received several anonymous messages, repeating the same accusations, clearly coordinated. At the property, Martha faced similar problems. Neighbors who were previously cordial now avoided her, and some even crossed the street when they saw her in town. Mrs. Carroll, an old friend from the market, was direct. "Martha, I don't want trouble, but a lot of people are saying you got yourself into an unnecessary mess. Richard is an influential man. He has business with half the people around here. And that justifies mistreating animals. That's not it, Martha, but everyone minds their own business, right? You have a grandson to raise, a property to maintain. Is it worth risking all that for a horse?" Martha returned home with a heavy heart. For the first time she began to question whether she had made the right decision. But when she saw the horse, which now greeted her with a soft whinny whenever it saw her, her determination was renewed. "You're not going back to that hell, my angel. Not even if I have to face the whole world." Veterinarian Sarah returned with the test results, bringing mixed news. "The reports confirm everything we suspected: severe malnutrition, parasites, signs of physical violence. But there's a problem." "What?" asked Jason. The registration mark on the hip was altered very professionally. Someone with technical knowledge erased the original numbers and tried to create a new identification. This suggests involvement of people experienced in falsifying animal documents. Martha frowned. "Does that mean there are more people involved besides Richard?" "Probably. And," Sarah lowered her voice, "there are rumors in the veterinary community about a network of ranchers who dispose of animals considered unproductive in cruel ways." "A network?" Jason felt a chill. "I can't prove it yet, but some colleagues have already dealt with similar cases. Abandoned animals, altered marks, false documents, always involving influential owners who are never held accountable." The revelation completely changed the perspective of the case. It wasn't just about one cruel rancher, but potentially an organized operation of animal cruelty. "What do we do now?" asked Martha. "I've already contacted the district attorney's office. With these reports, they can open an official investigation. But it will be a long process. And where does the horse stay during this process?" "With you, if you accept the legal responsibility. You would become the official custodians of the animal." Martha and Jason accepted without hesitation, but they knew that this would make official their position in the legal battle. 2 days later, the situation escalated dramatically. Jason was at school when he received an urgent call from his grandmother. "Jason, you need to come home now. Something terrible has happened." The young man ran out of school and found the property surrounded by police cars. His heart raced when he saw Martha in tears talking to a police officer. "Grandma, what happened?" "They took the horse, my boy. They arrived with a search and seizure warrant." Jason felt the world collapsing. "What do you mean? We are the official custodians." Sheriff Peters, a middle-aged, stocky man, approached with a look of superiority. "The warrant is legitimate, young man. There are serious accusations against you: theft, receiving stolen goods, and defamation." "What evidence do you have?" asked Jason, trying to control his anger. "Enough to investigate. The animal will be kept in a neutral location until the conclusion of the process." "Neutral location where?" The sheriff hesitated before answering. "That's confidential information." Of the investigation, Martha approached Jason, whispering, "They wouldn't say where they're taking the horse. I'm afraid it might be back to Richard." Veterinarian Sarah, who had been called to accompany the removal of the animal, managed to get some information. The horse would be taken to a temporary corral on the farm of a neutral third party, but she suspected that this neutrality was questionable. "I at least managed to ensure that he will be examined by an independent veterinarian every 48 hours, said Sarah, trying to console Martha. That night, the property seemed empty without the horse. Martha could barely sleep, imagining the animal confused and scared in a strange environment, away from the people who had cared for it with affection. Jason spent the night researching animal rights on the internet and discovered something that would change the course of the story. In a specialized forum, he found the account of a biologist who had worked with animal identification. "Grandma, look at this," he said the next morning, showing the computer screen. "This specialist says it's possible to recover original registration marks, even when they've been altered. There are techniques with special light that reveal numbers that were erased." Martha became animated for the first time in days. And how do we get that? She works for a university in Chicago. She could come here to do the examination if we had the horse, but we don't have the horse anymore. Not yet, but if we can prove that the mark was forged, that changes everything. It proves that Richard altered documents and that the horse might have been stolen from another owner. Martha picked up the phone. I'm going to call Sarah. If there's fraud in the documentation, the animal can be transferred to the university for technical examinations. The call brought renewed hope. Sarah confirmed that if there was suspicion of document fraud, she could request the judge to transfer the animal to a technical institution for specialized expertise. But you need to be prepared, warned Sarah. If we can prove the fraud, this will expose a much larger network, and powerful people don't like having their schemes revealed. It doesn't matter, said Martha with determination. If there are other animals suffering, we need to stop this. Jason began to document everything meticulously. Names, dates, connections, inconsistencies in the documents. He transformed his room into an improvised investigation center with photos, maps, and detailed timelines. You know something, Grandma? I think Richard underestimated us. He thought we would give up at the first obstacle. Martha smiled for the first time in days. Then he doesn't know the Wilson family. We're stubborn by nature. And smart, added Jason, pointing to all the organized evidence. We'll show them they messed with the wrong people. The battle was far from over, but Martha and Jason had learned something important. Sometimes justice needs to be built one piece of evidence at a time, one truth at a time, one brave person at a time, and they were ready to continue fighting, not just for the horse they had saved, but for all the animals that still needed saving. The third chapter of this saga of courage and determination was ending with the promise that the next revelations would be even more impactful, and that the truth, no matter how buried it might be, always finds a way to come to light. The turning point began unexpectedly the following Monday. Jason was organizing the evidence he had collected when he received a message from an unknown number. I need to talk to you. I have information about the horse. Meet me at the market at 3 p.m. Come alone. Martha hesitated. It could be a trap. But something in the message seemed genuine to her, perhaps desperation. At the market, they found a man of about 50, thin and visibly nervous. He introduced himself as Mike Roberts, a former employee of Richard Thompson's farm. You don't know me, but I know who you are. And I know what you did for the horse, he said, constantly looking around. You worked at Richard's farm? Asked Martha. I worked there for 15 years. I left last month because I couldn't stand seeing what he did to the animals anymore. Jason leaned forward. What do you know about our horse? Mike Roberts sighed deeply. That horse didn't belong to Richard. It belonged to Elizabeth Brooks, an elderly lady who had a small farm near Oak Ridge. She died 6 months ago, and her nephew sold the animals to Richard. Sold, or were they stolen? Asked Martha. Officially sold, but for a pittance. The nephew just wanted to get rid of everything quickly. Richard took 3 horses, including the one you saved. And what happened to them? Mike Roberts lowered his voice even more. Richard tested which ones were good for heavy work. The ones that couldn't take the pressure he disposed of. Jason felt his stomach turn. What do you mean, disposed of? Abandoned them in distant places, altered the registration marks, invented false documents, said they had run away or been sold. Martha clenched her fists. And you kept quiet all this time? I had a family to support, ma'am. Richard paid well to those who stayed quiet and poorly to those who asked questions. Why are you talking now? Mike Roberts took an envelope from his pocket. Because I can't sleep peacefully anymore, and because I have this. Inside the envelope were photos, shocking images of horses in deplorable condition, documents with clearly adulterated registration marks, and most impressively, a notebook with detailed notes about animal disposals. I wrote everything down, explained Mike Roberts. At first, it was to protect myself, in case they accused me of something. Later, it became an obsession. I knew that someday all this would come to light. Jason flipped through the notebook, shocked by what he saw. Names of animals, dates, places where they were abandoned, methods used to alter documents. Are there more people involved besides Richard? There's a big scheme, other ranchers in the region, a corrupt veterinarian who falsifies reports, even people in the city hall who facilitate documentation. Martha understood the real dimension of what they were facing. That's why the threats, the pressure, the campaign against us. Exactly. You stirred up a hornet's nest. But with this evidence, you can bring them all down. Mike Roberts handed the envelope to Martha. I just ask one thing. Don't say it was me who delivered this, at least not until everything is resolved. After the meeting, Martha and Jason rushed to contact Sarah and the NGO's lawyer. The evidence was devastating and completely changed the course of the case. This is much more serious than we imagined, said Sarah after examining the material. With this proof, we can not only recover the horse but dismantle an entire network of animal cruelty. The NGO's lawyer, Mr. Frank Adams, was equally impressed. We're going to file a petition with the district attorney's office today. For this documentation, they'll have to open a full investigation. But Richard Thompson wouldn't stand idle. 2 days later, the situation took a dangerous turn. Martha was feeding the chickens when she saw smoke on the horizon. She ran to investigate and discovered that one of neighbor Bill's barns was on fire. "Bill, Bill," she shouted, running toward the fire. She found the neighbor trying to save some tools, his face black with soot. "Martha, thank God you came. I don't know how this fire started." While helping to fight the flames, Martha noticed something strange. The fire had started in the barn where Bill stored animal feed, the same feed he had donated for the rescued horse. "Bill, this wasn't an accident," she murmured. "I know," he replied quietly. "I received a warning yesterday. They said that anyone who helps you also becomes a target." Martha felt a wave of guilt. Her fight was harming innocent people. But the tide was about to turn. On the same day as the fire, the specialist biologist from Chicago, Dr. Patricia Anderson, arrived in the region with specialized equipment to examine the horse's mark. The judge, pressured by the evidence presented by the district attorney's office, authorized the animal to be temporarily transferred to the university for technical examinations. "We did it!" Jason celebrated when he received the news. "Not yet," warned Martha. "Now is when the real battle will begin." And she was right. Richard Thompson, realizing his scheme was being exposed, launched his final attack. He hired the best lawyers in the region and initiated a massive defamation campaign against Martha and Jason. Local newspapers published biased articles, radio stations repeated distorted versions of the facts, and fake profiles on social media spread lies about the Wilson family. "They're trying to destroy us before the truth comes out," observed Jason, seeing the hate messages that were constantly arriving. But the online community that had formed around the case wasn't fooled. People from all over the country began to share the true story, support Martha and Jason's fight, and pressure the authorities for justice. The examination of the horse's mark brought the final revelation. Dr. Patricia managed to recover the Keher original registration numbers. The animal had indeed belonged to Elizabeth Brooks from Oak Ridge, exactly as Mike Roberts had reported. "The mark was professionally altered," explained the biologist. "They used sophisticated techniques to erase the original numbers and create a new identification. This is only possible with specialized equipment and technical knowledge." More importantly, the investigation revealed that Richard Thompson had used the same method on dozens of other animals over the past 5 years. The district attorney's office acted quickly. Search and seizure warrants were executed simultaneously at 6 properties in the region. What they found shocked even the most experienced investigators: an organized network of animal cruelty involving important local ranchers. More than 40 animals in deplorable condition were seized, along with false documents, equipment to alter registration marks, and most impressively, a digital file with detailed records of hundreds of animals processed by the network. Richard Thompson was caught red-handed, along with 5 other ranchers and the veterinarian who falsified reports. The operation, dubbed Operation Trojan Horse, made national headlines. "I can't believe we did it," said Jason, watching the news on television. "We did it because we didn't give up," replied Martha, hugging her grandson. "And because we found good people willing to help us." The horse that had initiated this whole story was officially returned to Martha's care, who became its permanent legal guardian. But the real surprise came 2 weeks later. Sarah appeared at the property with unexpected news. "Martha, you have a very special visitor arriving." A car stopped at the gate, and from it descended an elderly lady of about 70, accompanied by a young woman. "My name is Nancy Brooks," she said with tears in her eyes, "and I've come to meet Star." Martha was confused. "Star?" "That's what my sister Elizabeth called this horse. I am her sister, and this is my granddaughter Emma. When we learned about the story from the newspapers, we came here." Emotion overtook everyone when the horse, upon seeing Nancy, reacted in a surprising way. It approached her and gently touched its muzzle to her hand as if recognizing something familiar. "He remembers the family," whispered Emma. "Aunt Elizabeth always said Star was special." Nancy looked at Martha with deep gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. You not only saved Star, you saved dozens of other animals." "And now?" asked Jason. "Will Star go with you?" Nancy and Emma exchanged a look, then smiled. "Actually, we came to make a proposal. We want to create a sanctuary for rescued animals, right here in this region, a place where stories like Star's never happen again." "And we would like you to be our partners," added Emma. "Martha would care for the animals, Jason could study veterinary medicine with a scholarship we obtained, and together we would create something lasting." Martha looked at her grandson, then at the horse grazing peacefully, recovered and confident. "I think Star has already given us the answer." The animal had approached all of them, as if approving the idea. 6. Months later, the Star of Hope Sanctuary was fully functioning. Martha cared for more than 20 rescued animals. Jason studied veterinary medicine at the nearest university, and their story inspired people across the country. Richard Thompson and his accomplices were sentenced to prison terms and heavy fines. The money recovered from their accounts was used to finance the sanctuary and other animal protection initiatives. Mike Roberts, who finally revealed his identity as the whistleblower, became an employee of the sanctuary, finding peace in properly caring for the animals he was previously forced to mistreat. On a sunny afternoon, Martha was brushing Star when Jason arrived from university with news. "Grandma, the animal law professor wants me to present our story at a national conference. She said our case changed the animal cruelty legislation in the state." Martha smiled, caressing the horse's neck. "Look at that, Star. You've become famous." The animal whinnied softly as if understanding, and ran freely through the pasture, its mane flowing in the wind. "You know something, Jason," said Martha, watching the horse run. "When I found Star that day, I thought I was saving an animal. Actually, he was saving us." "How so?" "He taught us that it's worth fighting for what's right even when it seems impossible. That courage isn't not having fear, it's doing what needs to be done even with fear." Jason hugged his grandmother. "And that one determined person can change the world." "Two people," corrected Martha. "We've always been a team, my grandson." The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky golden, while Star galloped freely across the sanctuary's pasture. His journey from certain death to full life symbolized not only his own transformation, but the transformation of an entire community that learned that love and determination can overcome any cruelty. The story of the abandoned horse that became a symbol of hope was coming to an end, but its legacy would continue forever, inspiring other people to never give up fighting for justice and compassion. The end. Dear readers, we hope that the journey of Martha, Jason, and Star has deeply touched your hearts. This story teaches us that each of us has the power to make a difference, even when facing seemingly impossible forces to overcome. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow more stories that celebrate courage, compassion, and the triumph of justice. Leave your comments telling how you would apply Martha and Jason's lessons in your own lives. And don't forget to give a like so more people can learn about this message of hope. Every day, we bring real stories that remind us of the transformative power of love and determination. Together we